I want to welcome you back to Sunday school here at First Christian Church for our elementary and middle school children. And last week we learned a little bit about Cain and Abel and how Cain got a little jealous about the offering that Abel had made, that God had liked it more and had taken. So Cain took his frustrations out on his brother and killed him, and the consequence of sin, but that there's forgiveness and that God protects the ones who loves. Isn't that right, Spanky? Miss Spanky's here to join us today for our Sunday school lesson because Spanky wants to learn more about Noah, which is what our next lesson is today about. And that's one of Spanky's favorite Bible characters is Noah. Isn't that right, Spanks? Where'd she go? Well, anyway, so we've moved on, and we are going to be looking at, in our Bibles here, we are going to be looking at chapter 5, which is, again, the big number 5. And before I get into the lesson, I want to talk about the workbook first, because today's workbook, I want you to start with page 46 and work through page 54, because those pages are going to teach you about the chapters in the Bible, how to identify the chapters within a particular book. And those pages help better educate you on how to identify those. So when you hear the preacher or one of the elders reading in the big service and they're identifying the book and the chapter, you'll be able to open up your Bible and be able to find the passage that they're reading. And so we're going to be working through workbook page 46 through 54. It also talks about in the workbook the dictionary that is in the back of the Bible. And in your green Bible, there's a dictionary. Isn't that right, Miss Spanky? Come here, you want to help me find the dictionary? You ever want to know what the dictionary was in the Bible? We have it back here. Oh, near the back. It's almost the very back, right after Revelation. You'll see it where it says dictionary up here at the top. And that defines words that are in the Bible. And Spanky gets confused because sometimes the Bible uses words that she doesn't know what they mean. So she loves to go back to the dictionary and look up those words. Is that right, Miss Spanky? Yeah, like for example, she doesn't know that archangel means a chief angel. Now you know. So those workbooks going to work back on those parts of the Bible, the dictionary, and identifying chapters. So let's get on with Noah and that story, which is in chapter 5. It starts there, and all of chapter 5 is what's called genealogy. It's a big word for family tree. You know, you've probably heard your parents talk about their family tree. And, you know, it's like your grandparents are at the top of the tree, your parents, and then you. And then if you have children, they're underneath you. Well, that's the same thing as genealogy. It just takes the line of people from all the way back that you can. And the Bible does a really good job at providing the genealogy for all the way from Adam, taking it, all the different fathers, the fathers' names, people like Enosh and Kenan and Jared and Enoch, all the way to Noah. One of my favorite little verses in Genesis is in chapter 5, verse 21. And it said, actually verse 22, where it says Enoch all we know about it is he lived 65 years and he became the father of Methuselah. And then there's this word, Enoch walked with God after the birth of Methuselah 300 years and had other sons and daughters. And Enoch walked with God, then he was no more because God took him, which I think is really interesting. It's like he didn't get to feel death, I think is what that means. I'm not sure. It's like because God and Enoch were really good buddies, because Enoch really did what God wanted, God just says, you know, I want you to come be with me. And it's a wonderful message. We don't know anything else about Enoch other than that from the Bible. There's some other writings that aren't in the Bible that, if true, would give us a little bit more information. But as far as the Bible goes, all we know is he walked with God. And that's a great testimony what a great man he was. We don't even need the details to know that God really loved him. So all of chapter 5 is just genealogy, talking about how we get from Adam to Noah. And we finally eventually go to Lamech. And then Lamech was the father of Noah. And then Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And then the story we go to chapter 6. And chapter 6 is where things get a little strange. And Spanky gets a little scared, doesn't she? Don't you get a little scared with chapter 6? Because we're introduced to these strange characters named the Nephilim. And the Nephilim, we know from other writings, are giants. They're like these huge people. They may have even been part angel. We're not really sure. We get all this weird stuff. And, catch me sometime when we can talk more about the Nephilim. I've done some study on them, and it's a really interesting phrase. This is about the only time the Bible references them, and then it moves on. But apparently these Nephilim had children, and they weren't really good people, and then the earth was just populated with a lot of just evil people that God was very disappointed in. And God was very upset with it. And I'm going to read, starting with chapter 6, verse 5. I want to read just a very small part of it through verse 9. The Lord saw that the wickedness of humankind was great on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of their hearts was only evil continuously. And the Lord was sorry that he had made humankind on earth, and it grieved him to his heart. Oh, it's so sad. So the Lord said, I will blot out from the earth the human beings that I have created, people together with animals and creeping things and the birds of the air, for I am sorry that I even made them. But Noah found favor in the sight of the Lord. And skipping over to the end of verse 9, Noah walked with God, and Noah had 3 sons, and they named them. So God, even despite all the wickedness, he saw the one good person that was still living at that time, Noah. And even though he was going to he had a plan to destroy all the people and all the living things, he decided he was going to save Noah and his family. And so, because Noah walked with God, it wasn't something just randomly selected. It's because Noah had gained favor with God by following his rules, by being a good person, not only in his actions, but in his mind. And that was just, wonderful testimony for Noah. And he reaps the benefit of it later, because the rest of the story, God tells Noah, hey, what he's going to do. And he says, I want you to build a boat, a big old boat called an ark. And this ark is going to be 450 feet long. And just to give you an idea, that's 1.5 football fields long. That's really big boat. And then 75 feet wide. And this boat's going to carry a lot of animals, not only his family, but his animals and birds and things like that. So he tells Noah to build this boat, and of course Noah does. He follows God's commandment, and I suspect it took him a long time to build this big old boat, just him and his family. And no doubt while he was building it, I got to believe his neighbors were probably making fun of him, and Noah was probably telling them, hey, you all better, shape up, because God's going to do something bad to you. And then they're just making fun of him and teasing him. And despite the fact that they were teasing him, Noah still followed God's command. He kept doing what was right. And so eventually Noah finished this big old boat, and it just so happens here in Kentucky, I hope you get a chance to go to Williamsburg, a person up there has built a boat which they believe to be followed the directions in which God gave Noah back in the day. He built it to what they believed to be the size and the width and the manner in which it was built. I'm sure they had to guess on some things, but I haven't been there yet, but I hope I get to go sometime up in Williamsburg, and maybe you've already been, but it's if you have, then you have a better concept than even I do about just how massive this thing is. So if you haven't, then maybe we can one day all go together and see this thing. But in any event, Noah finished it, and about a week before the floods were to come, God tells Noah, I need you to gather some animals because I want there to be animals left on this earth once the flood's over. And so, you've always heard the story, he got 2 of every animal. Well, that's actually kind of true, but it's more than that. So a lot of people think it was just 2 of every animal. Actually, there's more. If you read in chapter 6 and in chapter 7, actually it's more in chapter 7, God tells Noah, he tells him to get 7 pairs of all the clean animals, 7 pairs of all the birds of the field, and only 1 pair, to male and female, of the unclean animals. So there was more than just 2 of every animal. There was actually 7 pairs of most animals, 14, and a little bit. There's Clementine. And just 1 pair of the unclean animals, like pigs and things that the Bible describes later. So it was a little bit more than people actually think of sometimes, and you can probably trip your parents up on asking them that question. If did Noah only take 2 of every animal? No, most of the animals he took 14. So in the event, the story ramps up in chapter 7 is saying that once Noah was able to get all these animals, and they willfully came, which is interesting, and the tigers didn't eat the other animals. I don't know how it worked, but somehow God tamed these animals. They came to Noah, which would have been really neat to see them all just parade towards him, because there's no way he could just go and capture them. And they came to him, and he was able to get them on the boat, have enough food to feed them. And he got everything loaded up. And then once he was able to get into the boat, it says God shut the door, which, it had to be just a very dramatic sound. And when God shut that door, then the rains came. And it says that the rains came for 40 days and 40 nights. That's over a month that it just rained, and the water kept building up. The flood kept getting deeper and deeper, and people were probably beating on Noah's boat. Let me in, but they couldn't because God had shut the door. And even if he wanted to let them in, he couldn't, because God had already decided what was going to happen. And all those people eventually drowned, and all the animals on the earth that weren't in the ark, they died. The birds, even eventually, with no place to land, died. They had no food to eat. And eventually, over 40 days, that flood even got higher than the mountains. Think of the highest mountain you can think of, and the water was higher than that. So God just brought a bunch of water on the earth, and I don't necessarily understand it all, how it worked, if it covered the whole earth or just that area or what it was, I don't know. But it's just wild to think about it. And that, it said everything on dry land whose nostrils was the breath of life died. There it says that in verse 22. And he blotted out every living thing on the face of the ground, human beings and animals. And the water swelled on the earth for 150 days. So what is that? That's about 5 months. Good grief, that's a long time for that water to be on the earth. So we're going to wrap up the story there today. So I hope you'll come back next week, and we'll learn what happens to Noah while he and his sons and their wives and these animals were on the boat. So stay tuned, and I hope you'll want to hear how this story ends. And we'll see you next week. And don't forget about the workbook, page 46 through 54. I think you'll really enjoy it. So we'll catch you all next time. Thank you.